My name's Nevaeh. I'm 34 years old, living and working in Boston. That evening, I attended the wedding of my half-sister, held in a glowing five-star hotel in the heart of the city. I wore the pearl-colored dress my mother had once given me, and in my hands was a carefully wrapped wedding gift in floral paper. But as I stepped into the reception hall, I couldn't find my name on the seating chart. No table, no chair. They told me I could sit, temporarily, in the sound control room. At that moment, I realized I wasn't a guest. I was an afterthought. But what truly left me frozen wasn't the seat. It was the voice echoing through the internal speaker system, the groom confessing something no one in the family was ready to face. Have you ever been turned into an outsider by your own relatives on one of the most important days of their lives? Leave a comment, hit like if you've ever felt pushed aside like you didn't belong. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear what happened next, because what I discovered after that might change everything you think you know about family. I stood in the dark corner of the control room, my back against the wall, still reeling from the shock of the voice through the speaker. That sentence, I know the girl isn't my daughter, but Laura made me stay quiet, kept looping in my head like a scratch cutting into old memories. Memories I'd tried to bury, had told myself no longer hurt. But now they rushed back like a broken dam. I'm the only daughter of Richard, founder of the construction materials company Hathaway Ridge, a three-generation family business headquartered in southern Boston. My mother died of cancer when I was just 10. She left behind a journal, a few small letters, and an old photo of the three of us taken on top of Mount Greylock. After the funeral, my father didn't say much. He quietly packed away her belongings and closed her bedroom door, as if entering that space might undo him. Just 6 months later, Laura appeared. First, she was polite, gentle, even stroked my hair when I dozed off on the living room couch. But as time passed, I could feel it. Laura didn't want to be my mother. She wanted to replace her. Every trace of my mother vanished, from the handkerchief embroidered with my name in pink thread to the wool blanket she had knitted for my 8th birthday. The house stayed the same, but the air changed. Colder, emptier. And Chelsea was born. I remember the day my father placed his hand gently on my cheek, his eyes filled with worry as he saw me curled up in the hospital hallway after Laura gave birth. "Nevaeh," he said, "you'll always be my daughter. No matter what happens, that won't change." I nodded, but deep down, my young heart already knew. I was no longer at the center. Chelsea grew up under warm golden lights, with birthday parties hosted by professional planners hired by Laura. And me, I baked my own cake on my 16th birthday, while Laura took Chelsea ice skating in Vermont. It wasn't that I didn't try to earn love. I excelled in school, earned a full scholarship to Massachusetts State University, and became the youngest third-year student selected for a sustainable concrete research project, ironically tied to my father's company. But at every family gathering, Laura introduced me as Nevaeh, the one obsessed with all that boring research, then turned to Chelsea with glowing pride, calling her our little angel, the face of Hathaway Ridge's next generation. I was never seated at the main table at large events, always near the kitchen or by the door, easy to forget. Every time Chelsea posted a new photo online, the family crowded around to praise it. When I sent out the article I'd written for a top engineering journal, silence. Just a brief message from Dad. "Busy now. Let's talk later." The only time he ever defended me was when I challenged Laura's plan to steer the company into real estate investments, something I believed was far too risky. I remember him sitting quietly at the meeting table, thoughtful, then finally saying, "Nevaeh has a point. We'll reconsider." That day, Laura said nothing in front of me, but the look in her eyes as she left the room chilled me to the bone. A week later, my father passed away. The doctors said it was a stroke in his sleep. I didn't believe it. He had no history of high blood pressure, didn't drink, ate well. But Laura organized the funeral in a hurry. Everything wrapped up in under 4 days. I was allowed no more than 30 minutes beside his body before they cremated him. And then came the will. Laura sat at the head of the table, arm wrapped around Chelsea. The family's lawyer, Mr. Delaney, read the official document in an even tone. I still remember the cold settling into my bones as he spoke. All assets, including Hathaway Ridge, shall be inherited by Chelsea Hathaway. As for Nevea, Mr. Richard hoped she would continue her academic and research pursuits, which he was very proud of. Therefore, no fixed assets are left, but he trusts she feels supported through the previous educational funding. I stood up abruptly. I want to see the handwritten version. Delaney looked at me and smiled faintly. This is the final legal version, notarized 3 days before Mr. Richard passed. 3 days, I repeated. No one saw him in those 3 days except Laura and the private caregiver. Laura looked up, her expression calm to the point of cruelty. Nevea, don't cause trouble. This was your father's decision. And honestly, you've already received a good education. Chelsea needs stability to build her future. I walked out of that room with empty hands and a hollow in my chest. No one said goodbye. No one even looked after me as the doors closed behind me. The only people who noticed were the 2 catering staff clearing my untouched teacup. After that, I threw myself into work. I stopped calling, stopped messaging. But not a single day went by that I forgot. Not a moment passed when I didn't wonder, did my father really write that will? Or was he never given the chance? And now, standing in the back room of my half-sister's wedding, in the sound booth where the groom had just said, "Laura made me stay quiet," I could feel my heart pound with something sharp and undeniable. Not just pain, not just memory, something closer to certainty. That maybe, just maybe, the truth was finally within reach. And maybe it wouldn't look anything like the story they'd forced me to believe for all those years. I slipped back into the control room through the backstage hallway, my pulse still racing from the moment I froze in the wedding hall. The heavy door hung slightly ajar, warm yellow light spilling into the corridor, and that quiet hum of internal audio still floated in the air. I stepped inside, careful, as if entering forbidden ground. A technician was hunched over the soundboard, headphones on. He didn't notice me until I stood beside him and gently tapped his shoulder with 2 fingers. "Excuse me, could I borrow those headphones for a moment?" He looked up, startled. Are you with the bride's family?" I nodded without hesitation. "I just need to listen to the last recording, something personal." He paused, then handed me the headphones without another word. I slipped them on, leaned over the console, my eyes scanning the screen of audio logs. A list of time-stamped files appeared. One had just finished less than 10 minutes ago. My fingers trembled slightly as I hit play. Ethan's voice came through, hoarse and tired, against the backdrop of faint noise. "Hillary, I can't do this. I know the girl isn't mine, but Laura made me stay quiet. She said if I didn't go along, I'd lose everything." My whole body stiffened. I pressed the headphones tighter to my ears, stepped back, as if needing space to breathe. That voice. Unmistakable. Ethan. The groom. The man about to walk down the aisle with Chelsea. And in his confession was a secret no one had dared to speak for over 20 years. I collapsed into the technician's chair, dragging the timeline back further. An older file appeared, unlabeled, no date. I hit play. At first only soft static, then a voice, one I knew too well, Laura's. "Listen to me, Ethan. Don't overthink it. As long as Chelsea marries you, all of Richard's assets will legally pass to us. Nevea doesn't stand a chance. She's not even my daughter." I clutched the edge of the chair, my hand cold as ice. "I don't feel right hiding the truth about the child." Ethan's voice followed, younger, less guarded, an old conversation, captured and stored away like a time bomb waiting to detonate. Laura let out a dry laugh, sharp as metal. "You don't need to worry. Richard signed the acknowledgement papers right after Chelsea was born. All you have to do is marry her and it's done. As for Nevea, she's not even my blood. Once I take control of your share in the company, she'll have no reason to return." It felt like someone had sucked the air out of my lungs. That sentence, "She's not even my child," cut through me like a blade. All throughout my childhood, I'd sensed something left unspoken, a vague, cold distance between me and Laura. I'd always assumed it was because I wasn't good enough. But now I knew. It was never my fault. I had never truly belonged to them. I pulled the headphones off and set them down on the table, my hands trembling. The technician looked at me, concerned. "Are you all right?" I didn't respond immediately. It took a moment before I could speak, my voice hoarse. "Could you send me a copy of that recording, please? It matters." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll email it to you. Just write down your address." I scribbled my email on a small piece of paper. As I stood up, my legs were still unsteady. I leaned against the wall, eyes fixed on the heavy wooden door leading back to the ballroom, my head spinning. Chelsea wasn't my father's biological daughter. Laura had been pregnant by someone else, but forced Richard to acknowledge the child. And now she was using Chelsea as a pawn to cement her control of the company. Ethan, the groom, knew the truth, but had been coerced into silence. Everything I'd ever doubted, everything I'd ever felt but couldn't name, now had an answer. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo folder. An old picture came up. My dad and me on a mountaintop, his hand on my shoulder, wind blowing through my hair, his smile gentle, genuine. I looked into my own eyes in the photo and whispered, "Dad, I wasn't crazy. I didn't imagine it. They really did try to erase me from this life." Hey, Bill. I turned off the screen and slid the phone into my pocket. And for the first time in years, I saw something clearly. I wasn't alone in my pain. I had the truth. And sometimes the truth is all you need to start changing everything. I left the hotel just before 11 p.m., the Boston air colder than I remembered. Thin mist covered the sidewalks, glowing under the street lamps. I didn't drive home. Instead, I turned onto an old street where the family estate still stood, silent, like a ghost guarding the ruins of a dream. The house where I grew up, where it all began. The porch light was still on, the iron gate still locked, but I knew the code hadn't changed. Laura had always been so confident, assuming I'd never care enough to return. She must have forgotten one thing. I remembered every corner of that house like the lines on my palm. Every step of the staircase, every cracked tile behind the kitchen, every window that creaked when the wind blew. I entered through the side door into the storage room without turning on the lights. The scent hit me instantly. Aged wood, dried flowers, a faint trace of peppermint. It pierced my chest. It smelled like my mother, like the past. I walked straight to the library, the one room Laura had never completely changed because it had been my father's favorite. The room where he used to read to me when I couldn't sleep, where he scribbled notes in the margins of his favorite novels, and where I hadn't dared to step foot since his funeral. I remembered something Aunt Edith once told me. If you ever find yourself shut out from what should have been yours, look through the pages your father once cherished. He left things behind, not in words, but in handwriting. I traced my fingers along the old shelves, leather-bound books with gilded edges, volumes of law, historical fiction. My hand paused on a thick brown book with frayed corners. Commonwealth Legacy Law, Revised Edition. Not one of Dad's leisure reads, but one he always brought to meetings with the lawyers. I pulled it out, dust rising into my nose. As I flipped through, something slipped out and landed on the carpet. A sealed envelope, yellowed with age. I picked it up, my hand trembling. On the front, in his unmistakable handwriting, "Open only if Nevaeh is removed from inheritance." I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten will. No doubt my father's handwriting. The ink had faded in places, but the message was clear. I, Richard Benjamin Hathaway, leave all personal assets and my shares in Hathaway Ridge to my daughter, Nevaeh Claire Hathaway, under one condition, that she does not marry before the age of 35. because she has always been independent, strong, and capable of leading without relying on anyone else. Dated 1 week before he passed. I bit my lip, my eyes burned, not because of the money, but because after all these years, I finally had something they'd tried to take away. Proof that my father had never forgotten me. That he had chosen me, not Chelsea, not Laura, me. It made me want to sob and smile all at once, like a child finding a long-lost toy no one believed existed. I pulled out the second paper inside the envelope, a simple, handwritten note. Nevaeh, if you're reading this, I no longer have the strength to protect you, but I believe you're strong enough to protect yourself. Don't let anyone make you believe you're not worthy. I clutched the paper tightly, lips trembling. I thought back to the will reading years ago, when I asked to see the original Delaney. Laura's personal lawyer kept repeating, the notarized version is the final one. When I asked about the handwritten version, they claimed it had been destroyed to avoid confusion. Now I understood. They didn't destroy it. They hid it. I carefully folded everything and tucked it into my coat pocket. On the way out of the library, I stopped by the old fireplace. A large family photo sat on the mantel. Laura, Chelsea, my father. I wasn't in it. I remembered clearly. It used to be a picture of the four of us. I'd been cropped out. I took the frame down and flipped it over. Just as I thought. The back had scissor marks, the photo's edges uneven. They had erased me, not just emotionally, but physically. But I was still here. And I wouldn't be silent. As I stepped outside, the wind had shifted. Leaves rustled along the path like whispered voices. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew this. If the truth had been buried under layers of lies, tonight, I had pulled it back into the light. I returned to the hotel through the back entrance, carrying two things I'd never had before, evidence and the certainty that I had not imagined my loneliness all those years. It felt like holding a torch in a dark room, not enough to see everything, but enough to know I wasn't blind anymore. The wedding reception buzzed on, laughter, clinking glasses, soft jazz spilling from speakers like a veil over all the pretense. I stood by the wall, scanning familiar faces, all of them performing a play I'd been written out of long ago. I was looking for one person. Not my father, he was gone. Not Laura, who never saw me as human. I was looking for Celine, the groom's mother, the quiet force behind this perfectly orchestrated event. People only referred to her in hushed tones. Ethan's mom is intense, or she doesn't like anyone. But I'd met her 3 times, and that was enough to know she wasn't easily fooled. I spotted her near the auxiliary bar, holding a glass of white wine, eyes quietly sweeping the room like she was memorizing every move. I approached, keeping my voice calm. "Excuse me, do you have a moment?" She turned, blinking. No surprise, no annoyance, just a measured gaze. "You're Nevaeh, aren't you?" I nodded. "Yes, and I think we should talk. In private." She didn't ask why. Celine set her glass down, gave a small nod. "Follow me." We turned down the left hallway and entered a small room near the wine cellar. Once the door shut behind us, the noise vanished, leaving only a sacred kind of quiet. She sat down first, arms crossed, her eyes sharp as a razor's edge. "I saw the way they looked at you tonight, like you didn't belong, and I'm not blind when it comes to family dynamics. Talk. What do you have?" I took a deep breath and pulled an envelope from my bag, the one I had prepared at home. Inside were a handwritten copy of my father's will, a printed transcript of Laura's voice recording, and a photo of the legal document Ethan had signed before the engagement, something I had secretly photographed from the company folder Laura kept in her office. Celine held each item and read slowly. No questions, no immediate reaction, just pure focus, like she was reviewing a courtroom complaint. After a while, she looked up, her voice steady and low. "Ethan once told me he didn't feel right. that Chelsea and her mother were rushing everything. But I didn't push. I thought maybe he was just nervous about marriage. Now I see. He wasn't confused. He was being manipulated. I nodded, throat tightening. I didn't plan to ruin the wedding, but if the truth is right here, I can't keep quiet anymore. Celine leaned back, eyes fixed on mine. You know what will happen if this goes public, don't you? Everything will explode. That family will retaliate. Chelsea and Laura's reputations will be in ruin. I swallowed hard, voice softer. So I should keep living like a shadow? Let them take my father's company? Let a woman who never saw me as her daughter use his name to legitimize her power? A long silence stretched between us. Finally, Celine said, her voice cold and sharp, I'm not here to protect anyone. But I despise people who think they can hide the truth under ribbons and wedding gowns. She thought this wedding was a ticket to power. Then I'll show her it's just scrap paper. I stared at her, stunned, as she added, Give me everything you have. I'll handle the rest. I hesitated. You believe me? Celine stood and straightened her coat. No. I believe in what you gave me. The paperwork, the recording, the handwriting. The truth doesn't need belief to exist. It just needs to be seen. She walked to the door, then paused. You're not alone anymore, Nevaeh. Tonight won't go as they planned. I watched her disappear down the hallway, feeling something inside me lift, like I had stepped through a gate I didn't know existed, finding a kind of alliance I never thought would come from an outsider, an alliance built on truth. I returned to the ballroom where the lights still sparkled and the music played, but inside me, everything had changed. I no longer moved like an outsider. I was stepping onto a battlefield, and I had an ally. I stood just behind the stage, heart pounding as Chelsea walked up under the spotlight. Her ivory dress clung perfectly to her form, hair styled in an elegant bun, face glowing like everything around her was just the backdrop for her crowning moment. She raised her champagne glass, eyes sweeping the crowd with a confidence I'd never known. A woman born to be adored, never taught how to face the truth. Her voice rang out, sweet and polished like sugar on a wedding cake. Thank you all for being here, for loving us, for witnessing our special day. And thank you, Ethan, the incredible man who embraced all of me and the future I've always dreamed of. I glanced at the front table. Laura sat upright, neck tilted slightly to the right in that familiar way she used to scan and control from a distance. Her eyes darted toward the AV technician, exactly where I had placed a small black USB stick, hand-delivered by Celine just minutes earlier. Ethan stood behind Chelsea, holding his glass but not drinking, his expression as frozen as marble. And then it began. The moment Chelsea's words stopped, the room's audio shifted, a fragile silence, then a quiet click, followed by a voice from the ceiling speakers. Not music, not a toast, Laura's voice. Listen, Ethan. Don't overthink this. As long as Chelsea marries you, all of Richard's assets will legally fall to our side. Nevaeh has no chance. She's not my daughter. A shockwave cut through the hall. Laughter stopped. A wine glass shattered on marble like glass under pressure. Ethan's voice followed, softer but clear. I don't feel right hiding the child. She deserves to know the truth. I didn't step out yet. I wanted them to hear all of it. Every word carving through the polished surface Laura had spent over 2 decades building. When the recording ended, the room was musicless, laughless, a dense crowd stunned into silence. Chelsea stammered, turn it off now, her voice cracked with panic. Laura shot to her feet, eyes scanning desperately for whoever orchestrated this. But before she could act, I stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. No one stopped me. Not a single soul moved. Maybe they had been waiting for this without realizing it. I faced the room. Long tables draped in white cloth. Wilted bouquets under spotlights. Stunned faces unable to blink. I took a breath, clutching the documents. My father's handwritten will. The ink dark, the paper bright, every letter still warm with his memory. I spoke, not loudly, but with clarity. Maybe you've heard part of the truth, but I think it's time you heard the whole thing. No response. The room held its breath, afraid truth might shatter if it exhaled. Richard Hathaway, my father, left a handwritten will signed 1 week before he passed. In it, he declared that all his personal assets and Hathaway Ridge shares would go to me, Nevaeh Hathaway, on the condition that I don't marry before I turn 35, because he believed I had the strength to run the company, to carry his legacy, without needing to lean on or be manipulated by anyone. I paused. Chelsea stood frozen, eyes wide. Laura gripped her chair like it might stop the world from spinning. I'm not after money. What I need is truth. The dignity of a daughter erased from her own family's picture for not being born of a calculated marriage. The confirmation that I was never crazy to feel abandoned for 20 years. I looked at Laura. She avoided my gaze, had no smile, no smirk. She sat there, shrinking like the room was closing in. And today, in front of everyone, I'll say it plainly. My father chose me. Not Chelsea, not Laura. Me. I lowered the mic. No applause, no cheers. I didn't need them. I had spoken the words that should have been spoken years ago. And this time, no one could erase me from the family story they'd rewritten so many times. Ethan stood motionless after I finished. He didn't look at anyone, just stared at the wedding ring on his hand like it had suddenly grown too heavy. Chelsea stepped toward him, face pale, lips trembling. She reached for his arm, whispering more to herself than him. Ethan, this is all just a misunderstanding. I love you. We can still... The clink of metal on marble rang out, sharp and clear. Ethan removed the boutonniere from his jacket, set it gently on the table in front of him. Then, slowly, he took off the ring. Every movement like he was parting from something he had fought to believe in. He raised his hand, opened it, and let the ring fall into Chelsea's palm. I can't live beside someone I never truly knew. Marriage can't start with a lie. Chelsea took a half step back, panicked, as if that one sentence had just cracked the floor beneath her feet. Ethan turned and walked away without looking back. The crowd parted with each of his steps. No one laughed, no one clapped. They all just silently witnessed a collapse that had been carefully built over years, only to disintegrate in minutes because of one recording and a few sheets of paper. Laura jumped out of her seat, her face flushed red, fists clenched. She marched toward me, the pounding of her heels on the floor sounding like war drums. I didn't move. Her eyes were bloodshot, burning with fire. You little witch, she hissed through her teeth. You've no idea what you've just done. Then her hand flew up. I felt the air slice past my face right before the sting landed. Everything around us froze for a second. No one spoke. No one stepped in. I stood still, cheek burning, but my back stayed straight. I didn't cry. I didn't bow my head. I looked her right in the eyes. No, I said, my voice low and steady. You're the one who doesn't know what you just hit. Laura froze. I pulled a file folder from my bag and held it up under the light. If you want to play power games, I said, my voice echoing through the thick silence, at least learn the rules. I am the sole legal heir to Richard Hathaway, and I just rehired the entire legal team that worked with him for over 20 years. Before she could react, another voice cut through from the left side of the hall. Maybe you should go ahead and mention the other thing, too. The voice was cold, sharp as steel. I turned around. Celine stepped out from the crowd, phone still lit in her hand. She looked straight at Chelsea with calm but unyielding eyes. I just got confirmation from Hathaway Ridge's internal financial investigation team. A credit account under Chelsea Hathaway's name withdrew over $200,000 from the development fund. According to the documents, the person listed on the credit agreement doesn't match any legal identity recognized by the company. The room trembled. I had never heard it this quiet. What are you talking about? Chelsea stammered, stepping back. I didn't take anything. That was the marketing fund. My mom. No one said you took it, Celine cut in. The issue is that the person who applied for that loan has no valid identification, and the ID number used in the contract, Miss Chelsea, doesn't belong to any Massachusetts citizen. Which means, she paused, eyes still locked on Chelsea, someone used a false identity to withdraw company funds, and the signature, based on preliminary verification, closely matches the one you used to sign your marriage license this morning. Chelsea froze. Laura turned to her daughter, disbelief on her face. What did you do, Chelsea? Her voice was hoarse. I looked at Chelsea, the face that was always held high, always bathed in spotlight and praise, now pale as paper. She turned to her mother, her voice cracking. I just wanted a chance. I'm tired of always living in someone's shadow. They don't know how hard I've tried. By faking identities? By stealing from your own family's company? I didn't raise my voice, I asked quietly, but each word pierced through the illusion they'd tried so hard to protect. Everything I ever tried to protect, everything that was stolen from me was used to fuel another lie. Laura said nothing. She slumped into a chair, one hand on her forehead, silent, as if everything that had just happened was redrawing the portrait of her daughter in front of a room full of people, and she could no longer cover it up. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel pity either. What I brought wasn't revenge. It was truth. And I stood there, shoulders squared, meeting every lowered gaze, every averted eye. No one believed in the image Laura built anymore. Not after tonight. Not after everything she'd tried to hide was dragged into the light. And what remained was truth. Laura stepped toward me on trembling legs, as if the floor beneath her had turned to water. Her dress trailed lightly behind, each step slow, heavy. When she was just a few steps away, she stopped and looked up at me in silence. No sharpness in her eyes, no more posturing. She lowered herself to the ground, slowly, as if surrendering the last of her pride. I stood still, looking down at the woman who had spent years controlling every part of my life. Laura took my hand, not firmly, just enough to ask for warmth. She looked up, her voice so soft I had to lean down to hear her. I'm sorry. Those two words floated out like a whisper, but carried the weight of years. An apology from her, something I never believed I'd hear. But not every apology can patch over the cracks left behind. I looked at my hand in hers, then gently pulled away. Not harshly, not coldly, just a quiet end. I looked into her eyes without flinching, without rushing toward forgiveness. Have you ever loved me like a daughter? Laura didn't answer. She looked at me, her lips pressed shut, her eyes flickering with a fragile light that wasn't quite tears. I didn't need to hear a denial or an excuse. That question didn't require an answer. It already lived in the silence. I turned and walked away. The rustle of Chelsea's dress behind me, the whispers from the right side of the room, someone coughing faintly, all of it faded like distant music as I left the center of the celebration. No one stopped me. No one dared to call my name again. Maybe because they'd realized I was no longer the quiet shadow standing behind their family portrait. Just before reaching the doors, a hand rested gently on my shoulder. I paused and turned. Celine. Without a word, she wrapped me in a tight hug, the embrace of a woman who had lived long enough to understand loss and what it means to hold on to what truly matters. My shoulders trembled slightly. Not from weakness, but from finally being held by someone who didn't need me to become someone else, who didn't ask me to prove I was enough. So proud of you, she whispered, and if you ever need, I'm here. I nodded. No words were needed. From a distance, I felt the gaze of the entire room settle on us. Not because of the secrets I'd exposed, but because in that moment they witnessed something else. A passing of the torch. Not between bloodlines, but between two spirits strong enough to know what's real and what's not. Celine let me go as gently as if afraid I'd vanish. I turned back and let my eyes sweep across the crowd. Faces familiar and unfamiliar, people who once applauded or stayed silent when I was pushed aside. No one said a word. No one held my gaze for more than a breath. I used to walk out of rooms like this with a heart full of questions. But now, I walked out knowing one thing for sure. No one gets to decide where I belong, except me. As I passed through the lobby, I saw the wedding photo of Chelsea and Ethan propped at the entrance, silver frame etched with vintage designs reflecting two people who once believed everything could be built on lies. I paused for a second, not to mock, not to mourn, just to look one last time at what I had escaped. I pushed open the doors. The night air was cool, but not bitter. The moon hung high, casting a soft glow across the damp pavement. Beneath the hem of my dress, my feet met the ground. Firm, real, enough to make me smile. No one called after me, no one tried to stop me. And that was freedom. A week has passed since that night. I walked into Hathaway Ridge's main building on a sunny Monday morning, holding a hot coffee, my heart beat slow but steady. Outside, the bustle was the same as any other morning. Assistants tapping keyboards, hallway staff organizing folders, phones ringing steadily behind closed doors like the heartbeat of a machine that never sleeps. But for me, everything had changed. My name is now engraved again on the polished brass plaque set in the center of the lobby, Nevaeh Claire Hathaway, Chief Executive Officer. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet. As if after all those years of fighting, what I received wasn't victory, but the return of a place that should never have been taken from me. The first board meeting began at 8:30 a.m. I stepped into the main conference room, the same room I was once excluded from just for being an outsider. The board members looked at me with mixed expressions, some cautious, some curious, and some with a quiet respect, the kind that only comes after watching your entire family unravel across front-page headlines for a week straight. I didn't say much. I presented a clear restructuring plan, every objective, every role, every change that needed to happen. A few nodded. Some asked measured questions. No one pushed back. The meeting ended in silence, but in Mr. Samuel's eyes, the man who was once my father's closest friend, I saw a faint gleam like the final punctuation mark at the end of a very long sentence. As I gathered my documents, he walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. Richard would be proud. I looked at him and nodded slightly. There was nothing else that needed to be said. That sentence didn't require an answer. That afternoon, I moved into my new apartment by Lake Michigan. A small space, just 2 rooms, high ceilings, light wood floors, and wide glass windows that opened onto the still water. I arranged the books myself, hung each picture frame one by one. A part of me needed to do this, to begin again with my own hands. The same way I've always continued forward no matter how many times I was knocked down. The first picture I hung was a pencil sketch I'd done back in college. A quiet corner of an old bridge in Cambridge, where I used to sit in the late afternoons when no one in my family remembered I existed. I used to hide that drawing in the bottom drawer of my dorm desk, thinking it was too messy, too childish. But now, when I looked at it again, I didn't see mistakes. I saw a girl trying to hold on to herself in a world that had no room for her. I started drawing again every night, not for an exhibit, not for anyone else, just because I wanted to see lines come to life again through my hands, real and unfiltered. 3 days later, I received a short message. "Can I see you for a bit? Ethan." We met at a small cafe near the park. When I arrived, he was already there, wearing that dark brown coat he often wore. His face looked lighter somehow, softer. He stood up, pulled out a chair for me, then sat down across from me. "I just wanted to say thank you," he began. His voice wasn't stiff like it was on the wedding day. "Not for exposing everything, but for giving me the chance to step out of a life that was never mine. I looked at him and gently stirred my tea. "You can thank yourself," I said. "I just pushed open a door you should have opened long ago." He smiled, his eyes softening. "Maybe, but not everyone's brave enough to open the door that leads out of a warm room, even when they know it's fake." We didn't talk much more. The conversation was short, gentle, like a breeze just strong enough to stir a wind chime on a quiet porch. As I stood to leave, Ethan lightly touched my hand. "Did you ever regret it?" he asked. "Saying it all, disrupting the ceremony, the family, everything?" I paused for a beat, then shook my head. "I don't regret it. I only regret staying silent for so long." I walked out of the cafe and into the windy autumn afternoon. Maple leaves twirled around my feet. No one called after me, and that was okay. The sound of my own footsteps has always been the most reliable voice calling me forward. I sat alone by the window. The warm glow from the small kitchen light spilled behind me, while in front of me the city lit up. Each window a quiet story unfolding. Lake Michigan reflected the glow like a giant mirror, calm and deep. A breeze slipped in through the curtain edge, and I gently pulled the shawl tighter over my shoulder, still holding the cup of tea that had long gone cold. I didn't turn on music. I didn't need any sound to fill the space. The stillness itself was what finally made me feel present. With myself. Not overshadowed, not dismissed, not reshaped to fit someone else's view of me. I thought about the word family, a concept that once made me both ache and tremble. People often tie it to blood, to holiday pictures, to dinner tables with every seat filled. But I spent my youth sitting at full tables, feeling like a ghost. I was exhausted in my own childhood home, clinging to bits of warmth from people who always looked at me like an extra piece in a perfectly assembled puzzle. I remember every moment I was left behind. The chair near the kitchen during my father's company party. The compliments always saved for my younger sister. The look on my stepmother's face when I tried to present my first report to the board and wasn't allowed to read past the third line. Those wounds don't make me cry anymore, but they're still there, like faint scars you learn to live with instead of trying to erase. And then I thought about Celine, a woman with no blood ties to me, no reason to stand by my side, but who still chose to do what was right. I thought about Ethan, the one who stayed silent, but eventually found the courage to step out of a life that had been scripted for him. I thought about Mr. Samuel, about the quiet nods in the boardroom, about those who didn't see me as Richard's forgotten daughter, but as a person standing tall on her own 2 feet. I reached out and touched the glass of the window, cold and smooth. Outside, a young couple walked hand in hand under the streetlight, their child skipping between them, laughter rising into the damp air of early fall. I smiled gently. Maybe family isn't the people who gave you life. Maybe it's the people who stay when you have nothing left to give. The ones who don't need you to be perfect, who don't need you to match them, just to be yourself. The ones who see your wounds and still choose to walk with you. I used to think I had to be perfect, to stay silent, to grit my teeth and endure just to be accepted, so that one day they might turn around, look at me and say, "You deserve it." But it turns out your worth doesn't lie in the approval of those who never intended to love you. It lies in whether you have the courage to step away from a place that's no longer home, to find somewhere you don't have to hide any part of yourself. I still keep the old photo in a small box, a family picture from when I was 10, with my biological mother, my father, and me standing in between them, holding hands. That picture is real. That was family in every sense of the word, and it's also where I first began to learn love, before I ever learned how to heal. I don't expect everyone to understand the journey I've walked. Not everyone has been cast out of the very home they were born into. But if you've ever sat alone in a crowded room, if you've ever felt like the shadow no one calls by name among the people who claim to be your own, then maybe you'll understand. I wonder, have you ever been forced to walk away from the place you once called home just to finally find yourself? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you also know that the first step outside your comfort zone, no matter how painful, is also the first step toward true freedom. I don't tell this story to complain or ask for sympathy. I share it because somewhere out there, someone might be standing in front of a closed door shut by the very people they once called family, and asking themselves if it's wrong to want love that's fair. If you've ever gone through something similar, if you've been pushed aside, overlooked just because you didn't fit the mold they created, please share your thoughts. I truly want to know. What do you think about this story? Would you forgive or would you walk away? Do you believe family is something you're born into or something you choose to keep? Leave your comment below. Every story shared might just be the doorway to healing for someone else. And if you'd like to keep hearing real stories about family, betrayal, awakenings, and the courage to choose yourself again, don't forget to follow the channel. The stories coming up, I believe, will move you deeply, as sometimes it's what happens within a family that surprises us the most.